Hi, my name is Chris, and in this video I'm going to be talking about the role of altruism in the consumer and business relationship. So, altruism is a critical component of our human nature. Given the fact that we are pack animals, we hang out in groups, we form groups and networks and tribes, it's important that we know how to make ties with other people and network with other people and build a certain level of intimacy. If we go back to hunter-gatherer days, where there were dangers lurking around everywhere, there were predators, there were an abundance of other tribe members who were always looking to attack, it was important that we hung out in big groups of people, in tribes, because that's what ensured our safety. That's what ensured that we had access to resources, to goods and services, and we had a platform of support. You can think even in the case of falling ill or raising a child, being part of a group of people gave you access to that social support, that support network that would be able to contribute somehow to your own well-being. So how does this relate to altruism? Well, if you think about a group, you think about any group, whether that's during hunter-gatherer days or in the modern day, any groups that you may be involved with, in order for that group to exist fundamentally, you need to have a structure of shared beliefs, shared values, and rules. There are rules to being part of a group. Whether those rules are explicit or they're unspoken, there are always a set of rules that guide the group as a whole. And so if you are to be a valuable member of any group, then you must contribute in some way and add value, and you must cooperate in accordance with these rules and these guidelines that are in place that keep the structure of the group intact. So with any group comes this common ground, and that common ground is shared among each individual member of the group, and each individual member of the group has a responsibility to uphold the importance of the entire group as a number one priority. And the reason for this is because what's good for the group is going to be good for the individual. So altruism plays a role in this kind of social structure, this social network of building tribes, as it strengthens the ties between each individual group member. So you can think about each individual group member as bricks, and altruism is that thing that binds these bricks together, almost like the concrete in the middle. It holds these individual pieces together. And that's the mechanism behind altruism, that giving and receiving is the thing that binds each member of the group together. And we can see this from an evolutionary perspective as well, where each individual unit comes together to form a collective unit. And this collective unit provides a platform for each individual unit access to things like safety, support, and the exchange of goods and services. So as the old adage goes, if you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. So it should really come as no surprise that when we show acts of altruism, whether that's through compassion, generosity, or kindness, we start to feel good inside. These feel-good emotions, whatever they are, there is a neurochemical basis for these. And probably the most prominent neurochemical that is associated with altruism is oxytocin. So when we show acts of kindness and generosity, acts of altruism in general, compassion, we get a release of oxytocin. And this neurochemical is really, really potent in the sense that it's also responsible for the binding of mother and child during the developmental stages of child rearing. So you can almost look at this neurochemical as an important, a really vital chemical for the survival of a child during its developmental stages of its life. And oxytocin fundamentally is usually associated with the emotion or the sense of love. So from a psychological perspective, everyone has the capacity to show acts of altruism. And if we refer to the Big Five personality model and we look at the trait agreeableness, which is one of the five traits, the other ones being openness, conscientiousness, extroversion, and neuroticism. Agreeableness is one of the five. And agreeableness is broken down into two subdomains, one of them being compassion and the other one being politeness. And if we describe, those two subdomains, altruism falls within probably that subdomain of compassion. Altruism is perceived as an inbuilt trait from a psychological perspective and perhaps an evolutionary psychological perspective. So much like a spectrum, the way these personality models work is you can either score high or low on a particular trait. So in the case of agreeableness, you're gonna fall somewhere on the spectrum of agreeableness, whether that's high or low. But despite where you fall, being on that spectrum, irrespective of where you fall on it, means that you have some capacity to express altruism, express compassion, express politeness. But everyone will be able to express that at a different extent. On average, women tend to score higher than men in agreeableness, and there's evidence for this cross-culturally. And that's just to show that altruism isn't just a product of socialization of a culture. Although some cultures may emphasize showing acts of altruism more than others, but rather than being a product of socialization, this is really a hardwired, inbuilt trait of human nature. So we also have some insights into altruism on neurobiological level. So I wrote an essay earlier this year on the difference between the brains of men and women, and there was one particular study that I found that was looking at specifically the neurochemical dopamine, which is usually associated with feelings of reward and pleasure. And that's important to note, reward and pleasure. When dopamine is released, we feel a sense of pleasure or reward. And in this study, there were brain scans done on men and women that looked at the dopaminergic pathways in the brains of the participants. And the participants had to undergo certain tasks, one in which they were showing acts of altruism to other people. So they received a sum of money and they either had to choose between whether they were going to keep it or whether they were going to hand it out. And interestingly, when the female participants were showing acts of altruism, these dopaminergic pathways were high in activity, which indicates that women, the female participants, were getting a high sense of pleasure and reward from showing acts of altruism, as opposed to the men who their dopaminergic pathways were showing high activity when they were engaging in self-gain. So although altruism, the extent to which people show altruism may differ between cultures and genders, it's important to note that fundamentally it is a human trait that's universal to every human on the planet. So now you might ask how this ties into the business and consumer relationship. Well, marketers have known about altruism for a very long time, and they've known how to manipulate or hack away at this fundamental trait. So companies, when they offer promotions and give away gifts, they are showing acts of altruism. So a couple examples of this is buy this toothpaste and you get a free toothbrush, or here, buy this car and we'll throw in free floor mats and a year's worth of free warranty. So you might ask what the advantage of a business showing kindness and acts of altruism, what advantage that has for them. Well, when you receive something for free as a gift, or you find a promotion that you perceive as being a bargain or a steal, you have just received something. And when you receive something, those hardwired biological traits are kicking in, and you suddenly feel this itch to want to give back. Think about the being part of a tribe or being part of a network where cooperation and contribution were absolutely vital if you were going to maintain your spot in this hierarchy. And so receiving things triggers an itch within you to want to contribute back and want to cooperate back. So when companies show acts of altruism and generosity, this triggers within the consumer an urge to want to contribute back. And sometimes this may manifest itself as customer loyalty, because the consumer has received something and in return they give back their loyalty to the company. And in a sense, the consumer feels indebted. So they've received something for free. They've received a gift, and they feel indebted, as if they need to give back. So it's interesting because I've heard Gary Vaynerchuk, who is the founder of VaynerMedia, which is one of the fastest growing media agencies in the US at the moment, and he always talks about giving, and providing so much value to his online audiences. And he openly says he wants to provide so much free value. Like, he gives away so much free advice. He gives all of his advice for free. Like, you can go on YouTube and look at 2-hour consultations that people have to pay probably upwards of $20,000-$30,000 just to sit in the same room as him. And he's broadcasting that whole thing and putting it on YouTube for free. Completely for free. That's all, some of his best business advice and marketing advice, or giving it away all for free. He's put out stat decks and all of this free information that's made people millionaires in the process. And he explicitly says that he gives it all away for free, so his audience feels guilty and wants to buy the things that he's offering, which unrelated to his consultancy services, and more related to his passion projects like his wines and his NFT projects and all that kind of stuff. But he explicitly says that he gives away all his information for free because he wants to trigger his audience into feeling guilty. So when it comes time for him asking for you to buy something, you feel guilty and you feel indebted and you go and buy it. Now, I don't think all of this is a manipulative on his part, because I've done some research into his personality, and there was actually a Big 5 personality test that he did that's been published online, and he scores really, really high in agreeableness. So part of his nature is to show kindness and compassion and generosity. But one must think he is a really successful entrepreneur and marketer, and he's running one of the fastest growing marketing agencies in the US. And one has to think that, these insights, these psychological insights into the consumer behavior, these marketing agencies know, and they know how to hack away at the brain. So there are published articles as well to provide evidence to this notion that showing acts of altruism is advantageous for a business. There's a 2004 study from the Marketing Science Journal that found that when companies offer promotions and free gifts, it has immeasurable outcomes on their long-term sales performance. In his book, Influence, Dr. Robert Cialdini explores this notion of altruism and giving. And the number one core principle of persuasion in his book is reciprocation. Dr. Robert Cialdini, he conducted a study with restaurants and found that when the restaurant provided the bill at the end of a service and added 1 mint with the bill, the tips that the customers gave increased by 3.3%. When the restaurant owner added 2 mints to the bill, the tip increased by 14%. So that just shows you when you provide or some act of generosity or altruism, and it can be as simple as providing a mint with the bill at the end of a customer's meal. This increased the tip that the customer gave to the restaurant owner by 14% with 2 mints, which supports this notion that when you receive something, you feel indebted and you want to contribute back and cooperate in that exchange. And this is an important note for businesses who want to build loyalty around their brand, that showing these acts of generosity and altruism is really going to strengthen that tie between the business and the consumer. So altruism it's a beautiful part of human nature, but I don't necessarily give us the credit for this beautiful trait. I give the credit to our genetics. And nonetheless, altruism is a potent tool that's been adapted over the span of our evolutionary timeline as human beings. This behavioral pattern of altruism is responsible for so many good things, like our philanthropic endeavors, like the determination of medical professionals to save lives in our hospitals, and just for the general day-to-day exchanges between the ones we love. While altruism manifests itself in such elegant ways in our day-to-day life, it's important that we acknowledge the psychological and biological mechanisms that underlie this behavioral pattern. It's a tool for group cohesion. It's a device that benefits the entirety of a group so that each individual member of that group can somehow benefit as a collective unit. And paradoxically, this can sometimes sound selfish. You know, you give so you can receive. But we'll leave that debate, the altruism and selfishness debate, for another day, because that's a whole other area that we can discuss. But I think for now, let's just bask in the glory of our adapted, inbuilt kindness, compassion, and generosity. Thanks for watching the video. I hope you enjoy.